All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar on developing holistic advisors. Before we get started, and as we allow a few more people to sign in, I'll go over how you and the audience can get questions to us today. We've given you a couple of ways to do that. One is by clicking on the raise your hand button. That's at, I believe it's at the bottom of your screen. That'll allow me to actually bring you into today's panel. You can join us through via audio as well as video if you're set up to do that. That's really the best way to join the conversation today. You can ask your question and have any follow-up, and it allows all of us and all of you in the audience to see who is asking the question, which I always think is valuable. The other way to get your questions to us today is through the chat function. That's also a button at the bottom of your screen. We'll all be doing our best to keep an eye on questions that come in through the chat throughout today's event, and we'll get to them where we can and where they fit. It looks like folks are signing in at a good clip here, so I'm going to go ahead and get things started. Once again, good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar on developing holistic advisors. My name is Tim Kehrer. I'm with Kehrer Bielan Research and Consulting. We're pleased to be hosting today's event. We wouldn't be able to do any of this without the support of our sponsors, so I'd like to thank them now. Our sponsors for today are Ameriprise Financial Institutions Group, eMoney, and Midwood Financial Services. Thanks to all three of you for your support. This is not our first virtual rodeo. And what we really try to do, the best job of possible with each of our virtual dialogues is to try to replicate the kind of flow of conversation and sharing that happens at our in-person study groups. As you know, we're still very much living in a virtual world. We were sad to see the BISA conference canceled that was scheduled for July. So it looks like it's going to be a little longer before we're able to do these things face-to-face again. But we're pleased every time that we're able to bring a group together. And again, the more kind of easy flow of the conversation and the more sharing that can happen, we think that's sort of better for everyone. One way that we try to make that happen is to bring a few folks together that will appear on your screen today. I'm going to go through these names in a moment, but again, the best outcome for everyone is if you and the audience also join today's conversation. So please do that either by clicking the raise your hand button and joining us today on the screen, or by sending us a chat. But to help get the conversation started, we have asked a few folks to be on your screen today. We have Mark Bunyard from Bank West. We have Ed Cruz from Frost Bank, Kevin Burke from KeyBank, David Bressler from Ameriprise, excuse me, Steve Levis from eMoney, and Jen Shields from Midwood. Thanks to all of you for being here today. We also have a few other members of the Kehrer Bielan team on your screen. We have our principals, Ken Kehrer and Peter Bielan, and we also have Steve, one of the newest members of the Kehrer Bielan team. We'll be hearing from Steve a little later on. I want to start by giving you sort of a sense of what we hope to cover today. First, we're going to spend a moment recapping what we've learned about developing holistic advisors from the research and study groups and virtual dialogues that we've conducted. We're going to update you on how much planning advisors in banks and credit unions are doing. And we're going to analyze the quality of those plans as well. We're going to drill down into the practical things that some of you are doing to encourage your advisors to embrace financial planning. And we're going to explore whether financial planning helps advisors to better meet the insurance needs of their clients. But first, a quick recap of what we've learned. I actually looked this up just a moment ago. We held, as far as I can tell, our first study group that was devoted to this topic back in 2006, so coming up on 5 years ago. This is either our 9th or our 10th session, either in person or virtual, again, that has focused on financial planning. We've learned a lot, both through those dialogues and also the several years worth of research and study that we've put to this. I mentioned the first study group we conducted on this was back in 2006. That same year, we published a study that looked at financial planning from the standpoint of the consumer. We used a nationally representative a survey of consumer financial behavior to explore what happens when a financial institution delivers a plan to a client. And what we found is that it's a win-win-win for everyone involved. Households with a financial plan are twice as likely to have a great deal of confidence in their financial future. So having a plan from the client's perspective seems to make them more confident. So it's good from the client's perspective. In almost all cases, the advisor that delivers the financial plan becomes the household's primary trusted financial advisor. This is a powerful position to be in because being the household's primary advisor correlates with greater loyalty as well as depth. And right to that point, households with a financial plan from a bank or credit union keep 85% more of their savings and investments at that institution. So it's a win from the standpoint of the host institution as well, because the delivery of the plan seems to correlate with the household moving the household's assets into one place, into your bank or credit union. That same study, even though it made a strong argument for the power of financial planning, again, from the standpoint of the client, that study actually fell short when we tried to answer the question, does doing more planning result in higher productivity for the advisor? The data that we looked at seemed to suggest the opposite. Firms that do more planning have slightly lower average productivity, than firms that do less planning. That didn't sit well with us. It didn't make sense. It also didn't square with some of the other data that we kept hearing about from our sponsors and our clients and others. So we had to take kind of a novel approach, which was moving from firm level data, comparing firms that do more planning against firms that do less planning, and moving to advisor level data. We assembled a robust database of, again, advisor level data. So this is data that covers everything that you'd want to know about an advisor that could impact their production, their tenure, their book size, their territory, their business mix, so forth and so on. And of course, how much planning they do. Once we had that data, the picture became clear. More planning results in higher productivity. Now that confirmed, I think what a lot of us thought. There's an interesting thing to note there, which is that the impact to production accelerates as the advisor does more planning. So that is to say, the line that describes this phenomenon is shaped a little bit like a hockey stick. As an advisor moves from doing very little planning to doing a little bit of planning, the lift to their production is minimal. But as they move from doing a little bit of planning to a lot of planning, the lift to production becomes very, very large. So that's an important nuance to understand as you're coaching an advisor up the planning ladder. One question that's come up time and again in our in-person and virtual dialogues is, who should have a financial plan? Which of your advisor's clients should have a plan? We found the answer to that question varies widely, but there's a growing consensus that most clients should have a planning light or a foundation plan. And we've seen as the financial planning tech companies have moved in the direction of offering more solutions to that end that allow firms to deliver a form of a financial plan to a broader swath of their clients. And then, of course, for your advisor's core clients, there's still great value in delivering an in-depth plan. Finally, we've dug a little bit into how firms go about delivering planning to their clients, and one thing that has stood out is that in most cases, advisors and banks and credit unions are preparing and delivering the plan on their own. But in those cases where the institution is providing support for the planning process through the use of planning coordinators or dedicated planners, those firms achieve a much deeper level of plan penetration. So, these facts together, right, would seem to make a pretty strong argument for why our firms and our advisors should be focused on this issue. It's a win-win-win. Advisors that do more planning will enjoy higher production, and we're beginning to sort of piece together the keys to what it takes to do more planning. But in the several years that we've been focused on this and we've been trying to help the industry to move the needle on planning, it's not clear that we have, right, Ken?
That's right. And as you know, our firm is maybe best known for our benchmarking research, and we've now tried to turn that that spotlight on planning and to try to benchmark not just firm planning activity, but the planning activity of individual advisors. So far, we've assembled a database for 2020 on over 2,000 advisors from 388 banks and credit unions. And we get the data directly from the software firms. So we're able to have pretty accurate counts of to the extent to which an advisor is touching a plan and how deep they're going into the plan. Let me give you a little overview at the firm level for what we've learned. Last year, the typical advisor among these 2,000 worked on 19 plans, either created a new plan or worked on an existing plan. Let's say that each of them, on average, had 19 active planning clients during the year. The typical advisor of those, a little more than half were new plans. So the typical advisor was working on a little more than one plan per month. But looking at the typical advisor really obscures how skewed planning activity is in banks. Tim? Here we've taken those 2,000 advisors and arrayed them by how many plans they do per month. And you can see the story very clearly that well, about 62% of them do no more than one plan a month. And 3/4 do no more than two plans a month. To put that in context, if you were to do a plan and an annual planning review for 100 of your clients, you'd have to average 8 a month. And only 2% of these advisors do that many plans. It's even more stark when you get out to, if you want to do a plan for 200 of your best advisors, that's 0.2% of advisors do that much planning. And these numbers actually are an overcount, because when we get the data from the planning firms, they tell us how much plans an advisor has done, but they haven't told us the advisors that didn't even open the software that year. We're working, with our participating firms to help us sort that out. But back in 2019, when we did that, 15% of these advisors never opened their planning software during the year. So these numbers would, shrink down even further. But what we're able to do with this kind of analysis is overlay your advisors on this chart, so you can see which advisors are doing the planning, and target your coaching to whether your problem is to move advisors from 2 plans to 4 plans a month, or even to just get them off the dime to do some planning. Next slide, Tim. So with this data, we certainly can look at the breadth of planning. So among those 2,000 advisors, we learned that just 4% of them had a plan. 4% of those advisors' clients had a plan. But we're interested in going deeper than that to understand the depth and quality of the plan. And so we have a few measures of that. For example, the typical advisor included 2.7 goals in their plan. Half the plans discussed healthcare costs, but only 2% included a discussion of insurance. We're also interested in looking further at the impact of the plan, building on the ROI study that Tim told you about, and also looking further at measures of the impact of the plan on clients, including things like trying to get their net promoter scores. So we're in the beginning stages of developing this benchmarking analysis. We're interested in your comments as we go forward to improve it, and of course, we'd love to have more of you participate. But that's a quick look at the state of planning in banks and credit unions, and you can see we've got a long way to go to get to a situation where we would consider our advisors acting holistically, using planning as a foundation for that holistic advice. So we're going to try to drill down now in the rest of today's session to what we can do to move the needle and get more advisors to embrace planning. And the people sitting around the virtual roundtable have a lot of experience at that. And as we've shared those discussions leading up to today, it occurred to us that we really can't talk about the coaching and training needs in a one-size-fits-all framework, because there are different kinds of advisors. So I thought we would focus on a couple of archetypical advisors and get sort of input from the people around the table about how you approach that. So let's look first at the advisor who's uncomfortable with software. He's particularly uncomfortable trying to deal with planning software when he or she is sitting in front of a client. How do you handle that? Ed, why don't you kick us off? Is Ed muted?
Thank you, Ken.
Okay.
And thank you for hosting and for having me as part of the panel. I'm very fortunate to be part of a great group of folks. How we handle that, we have we approach it a couple of different ways. One is that we're out in the field, obviously, working with our advisors consistently to help them adopt financial planning. And then we've also saw a need to establish a team that can take, or that they could delegate that functionality over to them, so that way the plan can be built for, that the data can be entered, and that way that the advisor can focus on building the relationship and working on the relationship and the dynamics of walking the customers through the planning process. So we found that that's been very helpful. We've also partnered with Midwood to deliver ongoing training on a consistent basis as well. You know, they meet as often as once a week or maybe twice a month to reinforce or to show them something different with respect to e-money, or to walk them through case design. So we're seeing an uptick in the use of planning among those types of advisors, but I mean, it's a slow roll, right? They're sometimes looking at, you know, what the next year or two is going to look like as they're transitioning out of the business. And that's where we are working with them as sales managers to help them understand that, you know, look, let's try to get this book as profitable as possible and as on autopilot as possible for the next advisor.
So Jen, what does the content of that training look like?
I think first of all, we try to better understand where the advisor is. So Ken, to your point, I mean, there's different levels of advisors and we can't just throw one type of training at them all. And that's really been a big win for us, is really to look at where they are in their experience and their knowledge level, and to really start there, and then to really start on their perspective, right? Because if they already have that perspective that they don't have time to do planning, they already have that roadblock up before we start talking about a system or even financial planning. So we almost have to start with each individual, where they at, but then also go a little bit deeper and figure out their perspective. Are they a believer? Or are they not a believer, right? Because with this group, we're saying an advisor who's uncomfortable, they can be uncomfortable and still believe in planning, just not comfortable, especially, I mean, what I find is, you know, Tim, you said it earlier when we were talking about what does planning do for a client, and it gives them confidence. Well, that's exactly what that advisor needs to feel. They need to feel confident that they can use the system, confident in the output, and confident in how to deliver it, and helping them get that. That's consistent conversation, right? So to be in front of them consistently. And that's, again, what we strive to do is, as Ed mentioned, if it's weekly, we try to stay in front of the advisors just to keep talking about planning, right? And even if it's working with a real live client, to say, hey, just pull up a client, right? Let's pull up this client. Let's talk through it. What questions do we still have of the client? What do we see here? And again, it's taking it slow, right? It's foundational. It's building and building and building until they have that comfort level. And, you know, the numbers, as I look at the numbers, they don't surprise me. Just like Ed mentioned, do we see an uptick? Yes, we still got a lot of work to do. And I think it's that keeping in front of them, talking about what's in it for them. Right? We got to keep what's in it for them, because for an advisor to take time away from making a transactional sale to slowing down and taking potentially, you know, 2, 3, 4, or 5 appointments to complete the financial plan, that's a trade-off. And they have to see the benefit of that trade-off before they'll be willing to do it. So again, we try to get their perspective, get their experience level, and then set up a customized regimen for that advisor that really helps them take them to the program. I mean, to Ed's point, you know, we have weekly sessions with several different advisors, and they're all at different levels. And again, it's just getting them. And it's interesting to see when that light bulb does go off, because when it does go off, we all see it, right? They get it, they see the reason, and then they want to do more. So to me, that's just getting them at the confidence level, figuring out where they are and taking them from there.
Anybody else have a comment?
Sure, Ken, I'll jump in. And Tim, Ken, Peter, thanks for having me as always. So I'll just add on, you know, I don't think I have anything that's in conflict with what Ed or Jen shared, just additive. You know, one of the things I'll start with is, and we've certainly learned this in the last 15 months, you know, sometimes we try to make too big of a leap. So we're thinking about how do we take an advisor who's operating maybe in a really analog way on a piece of paper and say, well, we want to get them to use planning software and do it live with the client. Well, we got to back up and say, how do we get them comfortable even in their sort of way they operate? So what's their office setup like? If they're seeing clients face to face, do they even have a screen big enough to share with a client, or are they trying to, show an elderly client on a 15-inch monitor some stuff? If they're going to do it like we're doing it here, really practicing, do you even know how to operate a really successful Zoom or Teams or whatever your platform of choice is? And then starting there, do you have multiple screens? Do you know how to share documents? If we can't overcome that, there's no way we get that advisor to operate, sort of dynamically with some software. And then we have a training philosophy that's been sort of part of the Ameriprise culture for as long as I've been here, which is 17 years, which is an acronym called DOCKING, which is demonstrate, observe, confirm, which means, a coach really should start by demonstrating it for them. So instead of just hoping they do it, but actually lead from the front and maybe even cover a client meeting and show how it's done, then observe, watch them do it, and then ultimately confirm that they're able to do it on their own. So that's been, I know it's sort of grassroots and pretty basic, but that's been, I think, what it takes to get some folks up and running.
I think along those same lines, picking up off like what Ed had mentioned about, advisors maybe who are not looking to bite off more than they can chew as they're, they're thinking about winding down their practice. Bringing on the best firms I see, bringing on more like junior folks who are going to be more comfortable with the software, more comfortable with the Zoom, those kind of things, and getting them to get up that planning software curve and have an appetite for that. The firms are building in the next generation of planners, and they can support and partner with that advisor where they're going to get a lot of great client management skills from seeing the advisor operate and manage the relationship. They provide that planning support, and that seems to be a great way to just kind of build that into the organization and get some traction.
And this is Mark here. I think Jen, mentioned about the what's in it for the advisor. I think leading with that with them is really huge. That's where you're really going to get buy-in. So we took a pretty concerted effort on that aspect of it first. Let's make sure they understand that every other advisor understands the true impact that it could have on their relationship, right? And so we focus on things like retention, and maybe and even integrating that in the way that we incentivize advisors. And that really generally kind of, brings it up. And most of them say, I've got every aspect of this relationship covered. I'm good. What do I need? A piece of document that says that I can do that, right? And the reality is that more firms are as we are here today, are moving in that direction of leveraging planning and having the plan be kind of the core of the delivery to the client. So, it took a lot. It's a work in progress, but it's an always, that aspect of making sure that they understand that this is for their benefit. It's not just, because we created a checklist and said, you need to do X, Y, and Z, but this is really to your best interest and of course, the client's best interest, right? I think that's helped shift the mindset. I don't know about you guys, but I've got a very tenured team of advisors who kind of said, hey, I've figured this out. I'm successful already. Why do I need you, right? And it's really helped get that buy-in, and it's really also neat to see, and Jen knows this, so that some of these folks who were the laggards or the objection folks are now leading in terms of number of plans and how much they've integrated in, that planning into their practice. So exciting to see, but I think it's definitely got to have that focus on what's in it for me and have that discussion to get that buy-in before you go anywhere successfully.
Yeah. So you sort of segued over to another type of advisor we were going to get to, which is, the very successful advisor who's very comfortable with his or her legal pad, but they don't need to change. But as a couple of you also pointed out, it's not clear that those clients are going to be sticky, especially as that advisor sunsets and so on. So the kind of things you're doing to encourage that, like bringing in a junior or associate advisor, clearly, or it can help that. Any other things you're doing with respect to that wise old advisor who knows better than you?
I'll just chip right in. I'm sure, you guys are on the front lines doing this, but one of the best things that I've seen is providing that centralized planning team, because the fact of the matter is that old dog is not going to learn a new trick, and it doesn't even need to be an old dog. That dog set in its ways is not going to learn a new trick. But I think Mark really pointed it out. Once they see the benefit of the client having a plan and the additional opportunities to manage assets or promote additional products like life insurance, once they see the fruits of those, they are very active in terms of transitioning their clients and partnering with the centralized planning team to get that plan done for their highest net worth clients. And to the point where I've seen some firms kind of be like, okay, ease up. You filled our centralized planning team's pipeline, but that's a great news story. And again, the firm is getting plans completed for their client, and it makes that client sticky to the parent firm, and that's a huge win for all.
And of course, there is a problem with scale with that model, right? If you're a 2 or 3 rep shop, it's kind of hard to also have a centralized planner. The economics might not work, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It's more for that larger or mid-size kind of bank where you can get a little bit of scale and you can keep them occupied. I mean, from the software perspective, we really enjoy working with firms in that sense, because they can, what you provide to the firm is planning expertise, centralized planning expertise, so people know where to go when they have a curveball question. And it also ends up being software and policy and procedure expertise as well. And that I find that, the best firms at that centralized planning team can be a great kind of hub of championing a lot of different processes for the firm. So if you can scale it, it's a great solution for, a couple of different issues.
Of course, for the smaller firms, they could turn to their third-party broker dealer like Ameriprise to provide that service. I think you guys must have a pretty big centralized planning operation, right?
That is true. So yeah, and we come at it from a couple different angles. So first, I have a team internally of advice coaches, and I heard incentives a few times. I think Mark, you said incentives. I couldn't agree more. So I have a team who's incented to help advisors grow their advice business. That helps. Advisor incentives help. And then we have an organization we call Practice Source, which is a couple hundred person organization, given the size of Ameriprise, that advisors partner with, and it's a sort of choose your own adventure. It could be anywhere from I just need help getting the data gathering up and running and getting it into the plan, to actually putting it together and putting recommendations, to running illustrations. I mean, you can kind of choose how you want to engage and go after it that way. But what I do think is really critical is that you go after the incentive piece, and that doesn't have to mean money, right? It can mean recognition. I'll tell you the thing that I think I've said this on some of these discussions before. We introduced a client experience award, which is non-monetary. It's just it's a digital badge you can put up on your advisor website, and a number of those metrics that we used were about advice. And people have jumped through hoops over the last 18 months. Advisors have jumped through hoops to earn this client experience award, which was nothing more than recognizing people that were doing really high quality advice. No money, cost us $0, other than a little bit of development cost to put the little icon on the website. So it's just I think you have to hit it from all these different angles. You don't know if the recognition of a award is going to do it. You don't know if the economics are going to do it. Maybe it's the fact that businesses that do advice, practices that do advice, sell at a premium. So if you're in a model where the junior advisor takes over from the senior advisor, and there's some compensation there, practices that do advice sell for significantly higher multiples. So you just got to come at it from all these different angles and hope that one of them converts the old dog.
Kevin, how about you? What kinds of things are you doing to? I think you've had a nice uptick in your planning activity. How are you achieving?
Yeah, we have, utilizing Midwood for some training, Lee Van Huel through Kehrer that does, she helps with some plan analytics and also doing some coaching of the managers on how to work with the advisors, develop that planning. And then I work with advisors that are having trouble with planning also. I mean, we have a centralized desk for our private bank, but not for our advisor field. So for the old dogs, you know, typically they have a junior. So we kind of rely on those juniors to kind of lead that person from the teletype to the telephone type way. But we kind of work with that. The big thing is just getting them comfortable. We still have probably a third of our advisors that we really can't get them to do much planning. We try, we have some incentives, but the main one is as soon as we can get someone to start using it and they see how much more engaged the client is, how much the client suddenly says, oh yeah, I didn't tell you about this IRA I have over here, or, you know, I got this stock plan at work. I didn't think it mattered, but I want it in the plan because I want to see, you know, the client sees, here's my goal and I'm only at this percentage. It's almost like a game. They want to start, you know, getting themselves up the goal line there. So they'll start bringing in more assets. And I think it just, you know, the client, it opens them up to where they're more comfortable talking to the advisor. And the ones who have seen that, we see them use more planning and they love it. We don't force the advisor, by the way, you talked about the paper advisor, making them do it electronically in front of the client. We don't do that. They can do it any way they want. I mean, if they want to write everything down on a planner and then go away and do the plan, that's fine. We have some guys that do it right there. I mean, we have, you know, they turn around, they do it while they're talking. You know, we're open to all styles, but we have seen through it, we've seen some pretty good increase of the plan activity plus an increase in the quality of the plans.
Mm-hmm.
And I, you know, to add on to what Kevin is saying too, I mean, you know, part of it is that, you know, we're not going to force anybody to try to make an adoption that they're not ready to make. But I think that over time, what's happening is that it's the competitive forces that are starting to impact the advisor's ability to get that transaction, to earn it. And that's they're being forced on their own in a way to start figuring out how to deliver more value. And so it starts as simple as, you know, teaching them how to do a cash flow analysis, you know, the basics of inputting the information into e-money, and then maybe we stop right there. And they present that to the customer, and then there's like, oh, well, that actually is helpful because now I know how much I'm going to need to live off of. And then, you know, I'll go back in and we'll start talking about, well, let's see how else we can start filling in some other need. How can we start to deepen that relationship? So it is one step, one baby step, almost, you know, with the aid of a walker, getting there one step at a time. But it does work. It's just, you know, got to be patient, and we got to let it take its course. And to, you know, and I would even argue that maybe you have to sort of let them fall flat on their face for a minute or two, and then come back and support them again.
Mm-hmm. Well, in terms of the competitive pressures, the research that Tim mentioned that he did a few years ago, it's pretty clear that if someone else gives that your client a plan, they've got your client, right? So you better get it.
That's right.
Get it first, yeah.
Yeah, at eMoney, we used to say, if you're not offering aggregation to your client, somebody else is going to aggregate the accounts that you manage and you're going to lose the client. And now it's really changed where planning is that thing, because again, once you're in that relationship, you show all that additional value and things that your client maybe has never thought of you as in terms of just managing a small sleeve of their investments. And you, I think as your studies show, set yourself up as that primary advisor, and you're pretty much locked in.
Yeah. So go ahead, Dave. Go ahead.
So real quick, I was just going to add one other data point, which is in the spirit of competitive pressure. You know, one of the things we've studied internally for, I think, as long as 15 years, is clients' willingness to pay for advice. And, you know, we're all dealing with competitive pressure on managed account fees and wrap accounts and those pricing coming down. It's the actual opposite story on paying for advice. So the percent of people willing to pay for high quality advice actually has gone up since 2006, not down. And even, you know, our study ran through 2020, and it's really compelling, I think, to say in a world where there's fee compression all over the place, that is not the case with advice. And if you're worried about that at all, I mean, that's the best possible spot to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe a question to the panelists. Do you think it's time for us to make that planning skill a requirement for an advisor's role? I mean, if you think about it, if an advisor couldn't plan for retirement for a client, they probably couldn't operate in that advisor's role. But it sounds like, we've had a lot of success once the advisor catches on. But what about advisors that aren't catching on? Is it time for us to say the role of an advisor encompasses either being able to do a plan on your own, sending it to the central desks, one way or another? That's part of the role. Is it time after 5 years that that Tim mentioned and nothing's really changed in total? Is it time for that?
I could say it is for us here. We've essentially mandated that, and that's something I manage my advisors to from a performance management standpoint, right? Because and what we've done is we've segmented it, right? So who deserves a plan and what kind of plan, and it helps to kind of go through that process and define what that's going to look like, so it doesn't become overwhelming. But it's absolutely part of how I measure the performance of advisors. In fact, here at the firm, there's a timeout. You can't get a trade done unless you have some element of planning and you've shown that you've taken that time. So it's also, from a supervisory aspect, we've integrated it into how we review clients, approve trades, et cetera, right? But yeah, I would definitely think not only are we in that direction, but it's a reality, and it took some change in the culture and getting people to accept. But if you tell an advisor they can't process a trade without a plan, guess what they'll do? They'll do plans, right?
For better or for worse, sometimes.
Yeah.
Right. Because I mean, again, and one of the things as I talk with firms, they're very. I haven't run into anyone who says, mandating is the path to success, because sometimes, I've actually interviewed advisors. They're like, yeah, my firm told me that I couldn't sell an annuity without doing a plan, and so I chuck some data in there, put something in the vault, and voila, I had a plan. And I don't think that's where you are, Mark, but that's certainly, the wrong end of the spectrum to be on. I'm wondering, Mark, if you could just speak to how, because what I find is leadership is 100% bought in to these things. I've talked to any leaders of any institutions that aren't sold on planning. The advisors are going to follow the lead. I find it's kind of at that middle management, the sales managers, the leaders. That's really where I see the successful transition. If you've got that level bought in, they can really impact change more effectively with the field force.
I think just like anything, taking a broad stroke approach doesn't make sense, right? So you have to customize to each individual advisor's practice, right? Whether they're the junior or the more established, right? I'm a little bit different in that I manage not only the FAs, but the private client advisors, which are kind of your hybrid licensed bankers. And we've made that mandate across the board. So the focus on training and was across. And Jen knows this. We're going on, I think, year 3 of training. And so we established this curriculum that's evolving. But we started with a level set and said, let's just find out what is the skill set of each advisor in the area of planning. And we started with just being able to, can you actually enter a plan? Do you know how to do that? How long does it take you, right? And then started this evolution. And we're now on year 3. We're talking about linking sales. How do you do a plan? Great, fantastic. But then it comes on me to actually go in and inspect those plans. And that's where I spend time during reviews with clients, just randomly pull a plan, or, if they've met a new client, et cetera, and let's just take a look and look, because you really have to inspect what you expect, right? And so you have to be able to have a process to review what is it that they're doing, or are they just checking off a box, right? And one thing to add, what's interesting is going through this, and I think I even saw a chat question around, well, how do you change an advisor's style, right? Because we have a lot of the legal pad folks who will do that, and I agree. I think Dave mentioned that. It's not about changing their style, but what's happened is when they go into meetings, that legal pad looks different with the information that they're walking away from. because they know what it takes to go through the planning process. And they do take it serious. So they understand they're a fiduciary, so they have to take and walk away with certain information. So it's really helped us, from that perspective.
If I could just add on, I think it's a really interesting discussion. And, I'll just pile onto what Steve and Mark said. The risk with mandating anything is, you end up with garbage in, garbage out. Right. One of the things that has worked for us is when we have advisors, do whether it's a full-blown comprehensive plan, or I heard the language foundational, we use that language too. It gets pushed to the client version of their website, so the client can see the results of the work, and that has been really critical, because an advisor, if they're producing a document for the internal purposes only to get around a rule, we all know that may end up being crap, right? But if the client sees it, it's a whole different ballgame, right? Because they're not going to put garbage out to the client. They know the impact of that. So because of that connections we've made with some of our kind of technology, that's made it really much easier to overcome the quality question, because ultimately the client is going to see it, and then we know what that leads to, because we all know the data that says clients want it, they want to pay for it, and yeah. So when they start getting this really positive reinforcement from their clients that said, hey, I saw you posted my goals online, and I'm at 87% chance of success, and that's really cool. Can we talk about what it would look like to go even higher? And then the clients are walking into the sales conversation, right? And that little cycle has just been really, really successful for us in getting folks to move a little bit, and do it in a quality way versus just do it in a way to notch a number on the board.
Right, the forced march.
Yeah.
I think one of the. Oh, sorry, Kid.
After you.
I would think one of the big things that with Mark's group is, as he mentioned, it's been an evolution, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't just, hey, here's your your requirement that you have to do X number of plans. Going back, I do think it has been 3 years since we started the process, trying to figure out where everyone was, where were they with their experience and their knowledge, and then working from there. And I will tell you, it wasn't a huge shift when the requirement came on, right? Because we'd been working on it for so long, the spotlight just went on it. So that was something that really hit home with me, is when the spotlight went on, we started getting more questions, right? How does this look? Is this accurate, right? And you see the spotlight. So I really felt like, especially with that team, that it wasn't, I'm just doing a plan to do it. It was, I'm now worried about it, right? Again, it's a requirement, but now again, I've been working my way up, and now I'm really taking the time to understand. So that to me was a big thing. It was that evolution, right? It wasn't just, today we're going to flip the switch. The other piece that I would say that I'm realizing is helping them validate the information. Steve, you mentioned it, junk in, garbage in, garbage out, right? And Ed mentioned it, and we've tried this with a lot of advisors, is just reviewing the cash flow statement and seeing if they can explain it. And I will tell you, 9 times out of 10, when they try to explain the cash flow, they'll recognize if there's been problems. They'll see, wow, where's that number coming from? Or how did I get that? And so I think a lot of times it's just understanding what that output looks like, and starting with something easy like that cash flow statement to say, hey, let's just pause. You've inputted. Let's see what it looks like before you ever talk to the client. And then the light bulbs go off and go, wow, this would really be nice to show the client, but I've got to know where these numbers come from. And to be able to dig in a little bit deeper at each level, those light bulbs, you see them go off. So I think it does help, to really validate that I understand and have confidence in the plan before I go to deliver it. So that was just in looking at both of those. It was the evolution and really concentrating on one piece of the plan to help validate what they inputted.
And to answer, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ed.
Oh, sorry. And answer Peter's question earlier about, should it be mandatory? Should we be looking at? I would say, yeah, the talent that we would have to start looking at and recruiting to. You do have to have some sort of a planning background. You know, and that's whether, you know, you started out as a paraplanner or, you know, you graduated with a financial planning degree. There's got to be some element in there, some understanding of the merits or the benefits of financial planning. I think it's just sort of commonplace now that's what we're being not necessarily forced to do, but that's what the competitive forces are dictating. The second is that, you know, Mark is right. You know, you're not necessarily going to convert or ask somebody to become a financial planner overnight. Part of what they've already been doing and their mindset has been is like, well, wait a minute, I've always been doing everything in the best interest of my client. I've always taken this information and now we're applying and changing the sales process to it. How do, you know, and with respect to prospecting, with respect to extending the transaction, as it were, right? You know, you're not longer getting in there and then, you know, okay, so you want to go ahead and invest some money because your bank CDs just matured. Okay, yeah, mutual funds, let's go ahead and do it. Now we've got to take a step back and say, okay, what else is going on? Where else can we also provide some value? And then the other part of it too is that we have, and the way our infrastructure is set up is that we can take care of everything in-house. So all of our advisors know that you know, there isn't a problem or an issue that we can't solve where we don't have a partner that we can turn into or that we can bring into the case. You know, we especially when it comes to insurance and you know, advanced market planning and things like that, where the advisor is not necessarily all that comfortable, we can bring in these specialists, and we have those in-house. And then coupled with financial planning and resources from Midwood, you know, that is capturing more of our market share, and then also helping the advisor say, oh wow, this is really starting to, I can see where this is actually being helpful. Let me start taking a look at my other clients. And then that's where, as a sales manager, I'll go in and I'll start asking, okay, let's go into your book and let's start examining some of the other opportunities where we can deepen those relationships.
Well, let's look at another kind of advisor. The advisor who really wants to do more planning and says, I just don't have time. I'm doing 1 or 2 plans a month, but I don't have any time for more. In fact, Lee tells us that's the most common objection she gets when she's talking to advisors. I just don't have the time. How do you solve for that? Dave, you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. I'll take a stab. So, you know, I think it starts with thinking about where's the breakdown in the process. So when they say they don't have time, it's because they built up in their mind that there's this planning process that they follow, and it takes time. So part of it is saying, all right, is it the data gathering that takes a bunch of time? Is it you're actually spending time with the numbers? Is it planning for the client presentation? Just what part is it? And then thinking about other ways to do it better. You know, as an example, you know, even though we've had online data gathering for clients forever, the amount of advisors that still do that, you know, via paper is crazy. Sometimes it's saying, you know, that part of the process you could actually digitize and do in a different way than you've done before. You know, whether it's asset aggregation or just the online data gathering. So I think it's one about peeling apart the process. Second, you know, it's about outsourcing where possible, the parts of the process that are not the high dollar an hour stuff. You know, advisors are paid to give really good advice. They're not paid to punch numbers into a planning tool and look at the output. So where we can outsource that or send to somebody else, I think is really powerful. And then the last thing I'd say is, you know, some of our bigger, you know, teams, you know, folks that, especially in our franchise system where we have, you know, really mega teams, a lot of them have gone to the growing number of financial planning undergraduate programs and form partnerships. You know, you all, you know, everyone on this call has probably in the state they're in an undergraduate program that is graduating people that will sit for their CFP upon, you know, graduating with their bachelor's degree. And these are people that, you know, at the age of 17 decided financial planning was the thing they wanted to do. And they get trained on, you know, whether it's Money Guide or eMoney or Naviplan, they get trained on that in college. And these are great folks to bring in. You know, some of them will never be client facing, some will, doesn't matter, but they're great folks to bring in early on, even as interns to get scale in the organization. And a lot of times those actually turn out to be the future advisor for some of these folks that are, towards the tail end of their career.
Yeah, I'd wholeheartedly agree with that. I mean, we try to get our planning software out into every university that we possibly can to support them in their planning programs. I know Money Guide does the same, and it's hopefully it's built in better future hires for all of you. The other thing that I think is key is to try to kind of, I think along the lines of what Dave was saying, demystify the plan. It doesn't need to be this huge thing. Like, it sounds like Jen and Mark, you guys really kind of break it down into those bite-sized chunks and kind of remove that hurdle for the advisor where if they're just spinning their wheels or spending too much time on it, yeah, of course, they're not going to come back to it. But the other key thing is to get, I think, Jen, it was you. You said when you see the lights go on, you can tell in the output, and you get that hockey stick. If you're doing what I call blue moon planning, like I got to do another plan, and it's been a couple of months, and I don't really remember what I'm doing. It's not native to you. You don't have the muscle memory. But if you can get them to do 3 in a row, or 5 for 5 or something like that, then they get that traction, they get that muscle memory, and it's like, oh yeah, I could quote unquote bang out a plan with this new prospect or this new client, and it's a lot less burdensome. But it's kind of getting them over that activation energy to just get in gear, and then they have some momentum.
But with the kind of client portals that eMoney has, for example,
sure,
you can actually push a lot of that data input back to the client themselves.
Yeah.
I guess there's evidence that suggests when you do that, you actually get better data when they're putting it in themselves.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, sometimes a client's going to kind of clank on something and put in some bad data, but an advisor can certainly get in there and kind of review that in the same way that the advisor would review a cash flow statement and say, wait a minute, this isn't working out. They don't come to me at the end of every year with a wheelbarrow full of 5s for me to invest, right? So something isn't adding up here. In the same way, the advisor can do that with the client inputs, and we have tools to show an advisor who entered what when, if either my planner or my client entered in something that's a little off. So between that and some tools that are out there to automate that data gathering process, and I don't want to say put that on the client, but in some ways that gets the client invested in that portal, invested in that plan, and it can certainly lead to better outcomes from a planning perspective.
I think one of the other key ways in looking at trying to get them engaged, and Steve, in talking through how to get them engaged and what to really focus on and get that client even engaged in the process. For me, with advisors who are saying, I don't have the time, I'm already doing 2 plans, what I try to focus on with them is their current book of business. So your current book of business, you already have a book of business that are brokerage clients or clients. You're doing annual reviews for them. Go in and do a plan for those clients and demonstrate what you bring to the table, right? Because if you're not demonstrating it, a competitor is. So again, going back to kind of talking about everything we've talked about, one way to say to them is, hey, you know what, I know you've got a lot on your plate, and don't try, maybe stay focused on that empathy side to say, hey, I know you got a lot going on, but you've got a couple, you're doing annual reviews on a regular basis. Go out there, take 5 to 10 minutes, build a quick plan. You don't have to put 10 hours into it. Take what you know about the client, get it into the plan, have some output, and say to the client, by being a valued client of mine, you have access to this level of financial planning, right? And you know what? We've started it for you, but we can go in and customize it even more. So what I've documented here is what I know about you. Let's look at that first. If it's accurate, great. If I missed anything, I can update it. But that's been a quick, easy way for me to really take that off the shelf and say, hey, you can take 10 minutes on, a couple clients each week to do a client review for. So that's one of the ways with that level of client, especially one who already knows the system. I'm not worrying about that. I just need to get them in it on a, more often.
Does that fit into the kind of levels of service? And an advisor might offer their clients, where they would actually say, do you want to be a planning client?
I
Yeah,
know
think it's helped.
Go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're on the same wavelength, Jen, as usual. It helps to help that advisor break it down and segment. Some of it's just classic book segmentation, right? So I'll start with advisors and say, hey, look, let's look at your book of 5 million plus clients, right? And whether that's assets or net worth, those clients deserve a different type of planning need. Let's look at your book of $1 million plus clients. Let's at least make sure that we've got a plan in those. I'll use some dumb analogy, like you're driving cross country with a spare tire. You wouldn't do that, right? You wouldn't want to have $1 million plus clients without a plan, right? It's just that natural. So it helped to take that kind of approach so that they're not looking at this overwhelming. Some of our guys have books of 200 to 300 clients and are going, I've got to do 300 plans for this year, or Mark's going to get me out of here. It really is back to that with them. We're doing this for you and your client, right? And it helps be able to just kind of jump into it little by little. And let's start with the largest clients who definitely have that need. And if we don't have a plan, we've got to have a plan for them to have a plan, right?
And I think the other part too that we've got that we're looking at is with the newer crop of advisors that we're bringing in as we're trying to establish them as financial planners. We provide them a great deal of support too from a training standpoint. Again, with partnering with Midwood, we have different levels of training, and then with each one of those levels, they don't get to graduate to that next level until they can show that they've mastered, for example, cash flow analysis, and then presenting that to the customer. And then the second level is the sales side of it. Once they've created the plan, how do you start to present? And then the final one is like advanced case design, where we're bringing in businesses or insurance planning or whatnot. So that is also tied with how quickly they advance in promotions too, or officer titles. We will start to tie those down too. So, if you're showing that you can do plans and you're doing a lot of planning and your revenue is going to grow, you're going to get to that AVP, you're going to get to that VP, you're going to get to that SVP level. And with that, you're going to get more benefits, right? An assistant or an associate financial advisor to continue to help you grow and support. So, it's a little old school, but I find that that's still very beneficial in providing them a pathway to success as well.
Tim, do we have any questions that haven't been answered yet coming in?
No, I think the group has been doing a great job actually of covering them as they've come in. Yeah.
I've got one here. This question's from Richard Feder of Fort Lee Savings in New Jersey. Richard writes, I keep hearing that if advisors do more planning, they will sell more insurance. But we've really ramped up our planning activity, and that really hasn't moved the insurance sales needle. Steve, I think you've got some data that could answer that question.
I do. Thank you so much, Ken, and good afternoon, everyone. This has been a great conversation so far on developing holistic advisors and the financial planning. And I wanted to pose to the group the very important but age-old question of, does financial planning and developing the holistic advisor, does it drive life insurance sales? And I think we'd all agree, it's generally believed that when advisors do planning, they're going to sell more life insurance, right? I think we can all agree with that. However, you all are probably, as I did initially, doing a double take right now as you kind of read this headline here in green, and then you look at the bars at the lower, the blue bars rather, at the lower right-hand corner. We found actually through our research that doubling the number of plans from the average of 24 or a little over 24 per year actually results in a 9% drop. So going from 1 plan a month to 2 plans a month per advisor, you actually see a drop. And you can see also that if you extrapolate it out to 1 more additional plan a month, you actually see a greater decrease. And you all must be thinking, as I did initially, what the heck is going on? How can that even be possible, right? And so we dug a little bit deeper. We kind of peeled back the onion a little bit. And what we found, and this is interesting because we've addressed this as a group, I think, during the conversation, it's really an issue of the quality of the plans is what it turns out to be. And there's two things specific is number one is we see a lot of partial plans, as some of us had mentioned, right? They're not fully vetted. They may not include life insurance, what have you. And then secondly, there's a big difference between actually doing the plan and executing the plan. Someone had mentioned, I think it might have been Steve earlier, that, it's sort of like checking the box, right? And they just want to sort of check that box and move on. There's a big difference between that and executing on the plan and including the things in there that need to be included. So that is what we discovered. Now, I've got the slide here. Tim, thank you for moving this one forward. I wanted to sort of set up this slide and use this as a positive, actually. Okay, we know what the issue is, right? We know what the problem is. We were staring right at it. What can we do to fix it? And as you see here, thankfully, we've got, as we dug a little bit deeper in our research, we've got some really interesting tactical things that we can do in order to get that trajectory going in the way that we want. The first one here, really, really interesting, is addressing the healthcare need, right? And it drives, and we found that it does drive insurance sales. The typical advisor is only going to do about 7.5 plans a year that specifically address healthcare. It's a modest number. It's about 1/3 of all the plans. But what you see is actually just by simply doubling that number to 15, you see an increase in overall insurance production. If you're a standalone advisor, it's a pretty good increase, right? It's about 15%. I think we'd all take that. But really, really interestingly here, and you all probably remember this from one of our earlier sessions in the year, we were talking about advisor compensation. And if an advisor is part of a team, we generally see that compensation increases. It's the same when it comes to coupling the healthcare discussion and that advisor being a part of a team. Now what you see is a real dramatic increase in overall insurance production. So really two interesting tidbits, I think, here that we can use as takeaways. On the right-hand side, I view this in kind of my world and the work that I do. I view this as a huge opportunity. I think we've all touched on it as a group in the discussion. Only 1%, just a little bit over 1% of the 29,000 plans that we looked at had an insurance goal. I think we all knew even before we saw this that we knew it was going to be low, but that's pretty low, right? But I look at this as a huge opportunity for us. And we've talked about different ways to implement the plan, right? But generally, just by speaking, have the advisors speaking on an insurance goal or including in the goal has a dramatic impact. As you can see, if we just include the insurance goal in the plans that we're doing, it has 6 times the impact on insurance as opposed to adding the healthcare piece, which, as we look to the left-hand side, right, we came to the conclusion that on its own, adding the healthcare rather is pretty significant and has a significant impact. So just including the plan or insurance rather in the plan really has a significant impact as well. I'm going to take a quick pause here. I know we're getting short on time and I want to give our guests here an opportunity to speak more. Mark, I want to kind of turn it over to you. I know you've had some success on the insurance side as it relates to financial planning. Would you care to share some of the best practices that you've had with the group?
Sure. Yeah. No, these are very interesting numbers. Thanks for sharing these. I think it kind of came back. I think the word mandate came about, right? But when we decided to really make planning the cornerstone of what we do for all advisors, we went and defined what is a plan. What are the components? What are we going to say, yes, this is good? And one of the things that we did early on was making insurance and the insurance module of whatever software that you use a requirement. It almost forces the advisor to have had that discussion. And I think just that simple as it is, that concept of, requiring the insurance discussion to be part of the overall planning discussion and be integrated into any plan and require it before we give them the go ahead, yeah, we can do this. I think that just in itself changed the way they were approaching the conversation. Did it take a lot of coaching and ongoing training? Absolutely, it still is. Not everybody's grasped on, but we've definitely seen a significant increase, especially to healthcare related types of insurance. And now we're kind of, as Jen had mentioned, the evolution now is how do we leverage the insurance modules to go after business owners or more complex advanced type cases. So that's kind of the successes that we've had here so far, in having that kind of focus.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Mark. Ed, I want to include you in this as well. Any best practices that you can share with the group?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Mark hit it right on the head with having it be a part of it, and then a part of the planning process, and then you have to inspect what you expect. You have to look at these plans. You have to walk through their cases and then identify that why aren't they having those conversations, and then we have to deliver the resources. We are delivering resources as throughout the year. With how to pitch, how to have a conversation with or about insurance. We feature our in-house insurance specialists that send out articles and all kinds of other resources to help the advisor get a little bit more comfortable. And then frankly, if they're not comfortable, then they can bring in an insurance specialist that we have, like I said, in-house, that can partner with them and approach it as a team. And then we find that is much more beneficial and an easier conversation for the advisor. Now the advisor is still in the driver's seat, but the insurance specialist is the one that is walking them through that journey. And both of them, two heads are better than one in these cases, because they're helping that client understand the merits of having insurance as part of their financial plan.
Great, thanks for that, Ed. That's a really interesting point that you made as far as the team and including the insurance professionals of the team. It's really interesting, right? We see that being part of a team greatly increases insurance production, but it's really interesting to hear the different pieces and parts that make up that team. And that's really, really interesting to hear that.
I think it's certainly like a best practice that I see where giving the advisor that ability to reach out to the expert who's comfortable talking about that and kind of partner, look over the shoulder position, that kind of takes away a lot of that fear and concern for the advisor. On the larger end of things, the private bankers are another group that I find that once they know that the advisors have a comprehensive view of the client and can see balance sheets and liabilities, they can kind of come in and give the bank's perspective and uncover opportunities there as well. And I think those kind of things go hand in hand, but it starts with the advisor having that 360 view of the client to uncover those opportunities.
And I think you can even I think you can go further. I heard sort of marketing direct to the client. I think that's another piece, everyone should be considering. It's one thing to, try to convince the advisor to do something that they don't like doing or haven't done or don't have the muscle memory or whatever. It's a whole other thing to go direct to client and back to the advisor, right? To enforce their hand a little bit. I've seen, we've worked with some of our institutions on, leveraging our big data programs to say we can be really targeted and look at specific client opportunities, whether it's a big capital transfer opportunity for your wealthier clients, or it's just a kind of straight run of the mill, clients like you often have permanent life insurance, but from what we can tell, you don't at least have it with us. Is it something you like to talk to your advisor about? And just using sort of drip marketing and automated marketing systems that just go out to clients with offers to say, people like you often, talk to their advisor about this. You haven't yet. Do you want to? click here to schedule an appointment, and a lot of times that will, that'll force an advisor's hand. Now, what's even better is I think what some of you are describing, which is you have somebody ready to go, and a specialist who has the reps and can implement that business. But even if you don't, I think, if an advisor gets 3 calls from clients saying, hey, let's talk to you about that, now they're open to taking your call to talk about how to implement, right?
Sure.
I guess, Mark, you're in a situation where you can easily bring the bankers in because you've got licensed bankers who can, in fact, registered bankers who can actually be
And they're part of it. They've got planning. We started with them, and they're it's part of their compensation to do plans. So, it really opened their eyes in terms of what the power of planning can be. And speaking of bankers, one of the things that work well for this, and I know this is not a situation for everybody, but we also, took the time to show our commercial bankers or our business bankers, those folks that have the relationships we want, what a plan is, what it does, the value, et cetera. And it really changed their perception in terms of what our delivery became, is. And instead of becoming the money management guys, now we're the planners, and that's really helping escalate a lot of new introductions, whether they're to clients, but they're also to some of their COIs, their CPAs they've been working with, or attorneys, et cetera. So yeah, it's definitely helped having control over both sides of it for sure.
So as you can see, we've focused on 2 aspects of the plan as measures of depth or quality. Whether you're dealing with healthcare issues and whether you're looking at the risk management aspects of insurance. What other things should we be looking at, both in our research and of course in our coaching, that we should focus on to say it would be a better plan if this was part of it? What are your thoughts of what direction we should go in terms of picking up other things that are contextual within the plan? And we can't.
I think we've got to look too. I mean, and maybe this might be a bigger problem to solve, but I think we've got to look at how do we make things easier for our advisors to get more things done. And here's what I mean by that is that in 2019, if we saw a 7% drop in financial planning, what was going on in 2019? Reg BI, DOL. When we just added another pile of paperwork and requirements for the advisors to do on top of more and enhanced regulation. And I think we've got to look at, how do we start to integrate an ease of doing business for them, because administratively that can bog them down on top of building much less building a financial plan. So, I mean, whether that's APIs or looking at how we can integrate that technology to get it done or to make it easier, I think that's what we're looking at right now. We're leveraging tools like Salesforce and trying to build out forms within Salesforce. So we're looking at integrating Morningstar and coupling that with Reg BI, and then also tying the financial planning process or the financial plan light to how do we help them implement that Reg BI piece using the proof sources, if you will, to back them in their arguments.
Well, and clearly technology would have to play a role in that.
Right.
And Steve, what does a development path of eMoney look like in terms of what you're planning on the direction you're planning on moving the technology?
Yeah, so I mean, we've certainly tried to incorporate some of those elements. So, some of the fiduciary aspects of it into the platform. I mean, you guys live this every day, but there's been a few kind of false starts and changes of direction that make it a challenge for us as well to implement these things. But basically, our stance is always to look to, I guess I would say a primary focus of eMoney now is to make as much of our platform available via APIs, exactly the way I was talking about, so that you know, it doesn't all need to be done in e-money, but what's done in e-money can be extracted out to your business and plugged into your systems of record there, you know, and that can be as simple as, hey, this is the plan of record, send that over to our worm compliant storage unit so that the bank or the institution has this on record. And those are some of the things that we're really trying to make available now, is to make what's inside e-money available to get over and be stored on the firm for record keeping purposes. And we're always enhancing our you know, our compliance tracking kind of systems if firms take advantage of that. So again, who did what when, and then the advisor's got to come up with the why.
Mhm. Yeah, I think one question that Steve Lipker has focused on is the implementation of the plan. And it's not clear to me in the typical shop that you have a record of exactly what the advisor has recommended, and then what the eventual outcome of that recommendation is. And I know within Money Guide, there's this field that you could indicate whether the plan's been adopted or not. But it does seem like, and Jen, maybe you know this better than I do, it seems like that's just not used in most shops.
I would agree. I think there's, I mean, some of the things I wrote down in, you know, looking at even the insurance, it's a huge opportunity. But it comes down to inspection, right? So it comes down to inspecting and making sure, you know, even Van in the comments, you know, made the comment, how do we improve quality of plans? And in my opinion, it boils down to inspecting plans, you know, from, you know, the manager perspective. You know, if I'm doing a plan, you know, Mark, Ed, Kevin, whoever coming to me and saying, hey, Jen, let's just go through one of your plans today. Tell me about what the outcome was, right? What did we implement? What's the client's next step? What's your next step? So a lot of that too, I think, comes down to that inspection piece. In Money Guide Pro, it's there, it can be used. I think it's a matter of getting everybody comfortable with using it, making their documentation. What did the client agree to? What did they not agree to? Right. I mean, and again, that documentation is key, right? If you're going to take the time to do a plan, let's document what we're doing and what that implementation phase looks like. And to me, that, you know, the inspections and the accountability metrics there would help improve upon, you know, that outcome and hopefully increase that insurance number, right? Because if my manager's looking at my plan going, hey, Jen, you didn't talk insurance, you know, let's talk about some questions that you can talk to the client about the next time you meet with them. Or we see you had an insurance need. How was this addressed with the client? And if we're not seeing that documentation, whether it's in e-money, Money Guide Pro, we're not seeing that documentation, it's questions, right? Back. And to me, that's huge to hopefully increase the insurance and the other opportunities out there. But again, implementation to me is the key piece. We can do great plans, but if we're not implementing it, again, and that goes back to the hot button for the advisor, that implementation is where they're going to be able to get more of the portfolio. And if I'm not implementing it, what am I losing out on, right? If I'm just delivering the plan to deliver it. So.
Yeah, Kevin, I believe you have a dashboard that your managers can use to check monthly or quarterly on the inspect their planning activity.
Yeah, we have a dashboard. Kehrer helped us put it together, and every month the managers can click in on that month, but they can also look trending, you know, annual, year over year, and see which advisors are planning, which aren't, how much goals they're using, are they using the healthcare goal? There's different checkpoints that we put in there to help the managers kind of not grade the plans, but at least have an idea if is the advisor just mailing in, you know, intro plans with one goal and one asset. Well, then that's not really a plan. And you see some advisors try to, especially when you have goals, they try to tick mark it. So we try to use this to kind of hone in on the ones that aren't quite quality, find out if it's just a learning experience. Then we have Midwood come in, or we use Canon or Lee to develop more skill, or is it, you know, they're just trying to, you know, just hit the tick marks and move on and not really engaged in planning. But it's been really helpful that day.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where dashboards can help, Ken. I mean, I heard Salesforce. I mean, Salesforce has a great, you know, and we have to do some customization, but you know, a view of just how many times people are logging into plans. And you're going to find those folks that just go in, you know, 4 times a month, and guess what? They only did four plans the previous month, right? So it's kind of going back to that inspect what you expect, and right. Well, I was expecting plans, but I'm expecting results, right? We want them to dedicate time because we do know, as Steve mentioned, you know, that there's results tied to it. And final point here, I think we're running up on time, but sometimes it just comes down to basics for me. It's celebrating and recognizing and being able to, because we're asking advisors to change behavior, right? And that requires them to change the activities that they're doing. And you have to be able to connect the dots. And so what we do, you know, I try to be very mindful about is connecting success stories. You know, advisor did this plan and they took this approach and it led to X result. And that may be a very nice insurance case or something, right? And being consistent about bringing that up over and over. You know, you did this, it led to this. You know, wouldn't you like more of this, right? So that's helped us get some of those laggards who are seeing, oh wait, I'm missing out on revenue here because I'm being, you know, I like the way I do things, you know. And when you put dollars behind it, they start kind of thinking a little bit differently about it.
Mm-hmm. So before we pass the baton to Tim to sign off and thank everybody, any other last words from anyone who wants to chime in before we sign off? Tim?
Yeah, I'll say one quick thing before wrapping up. You know, I think going back to the first slide that I showed you all, you know, you can tell there's been an evolution in how we've studied the delivery of financial planning through banks and credit unions. And the evolution, right, has been driven by an effort to address the issues that you all run into when you try to get your advisors to embrace planning and move your program in the direction of being planning centric. And I think you can tell based on these last few comments, right, that the sort of we've made a case for planning in general. The next step in that process may be making a case for better planning, that the better the plan, the better the result the advisor is going to experience with the client. So that sort of when we meet for the 11th time to talk about this topic, that might we might have some fresh research to share with you on that. Stay tuned. I want to thank everybody for joining today. Thanks to you in the audience. Thanks especially to those of you that were on our panel today. And of course, thanks to our sponsors, once again, Ameriprise Financial Institutions Group, eMoney, and Midwood. Speaking of the future, we have the next virtual dialogue on our schedule is on June 16th, in a little more than a month, on the topic of retirement income planning. Look for an invitation for that in your inboxes tomorrow, and more information flowing out in the coming weeks. We're considering adding some virtual events in July and August. We're looking at recreating some of the content we would have delivered at the BISA conference, doing that on our own virtually. Steve Lipker is working on putting together a discussion like the one we had today, focused on the intersection of life insurance and technology. And as Peter and Denise are completing the 2021 advisor compensation study, we may be hosting a virtual event on that topic as well. Peter would want me to put in a plug for anyone in the audience who hasn't sent Peter and Denise their compensation plans to be a part of that study. Please do so. And then looking towards the fall, we seem to be on a pretty good path to get back to doing these things face-to-face once again. I've got our fall lineup listed here, and there are dates for those on our website. I think that's it. Thanks again, everybody, and Have a great day.
Thank you.